Video Store Podcast.
No more Roman hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Great Scott, boy!
Welcome to the 9th episode of the House by the Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be
Sean.
Derek.
And in this episode, we'll be discussing both Mad Max and Mad Max 2 The Road Warrior. But before we get to that, we'll go through the few things we've been watching this week. So to start us off, Sean, have you watched anything this week?
Not really, because I was spending so much time on that Volumes of Blood review we put up on the site. I did see The Avengers, not really horror related, but I enjoyed it. It was fine. But I'm not like huge into those movies. Like the first one I liked, but I only saw it once in theaters. This one I probably won't ever watch again, but it was fun, you know. It was fine. Other than that, I don't think I really even watched any TV shows either. I just basically was editing every day, and yeah, I think that's about all I watched, aside from Mad Max and Mad Max 2.
All right, so Derek, did you watch anything?
Just other than the movies that we're going to talk about today, not really. I spent a lot of time last week tracking the GameCube down and Zelda games. So I've been doing that for most of the week instead of watching anything. But real quick about the Avengers movie Sean was talking about. So you weren't like overly impressed with it?
I mean, I was fine. I liked it. It wasn't really a letdown, but then again, I didn't have like huge expectations because some people's, you know, were kind of critical of it. But I mean, it's a dumb superhero movie. You know, there was like stupid jokes. I laughed at them, but at the same time, most of them were stupid, and the action was fine, like good set pieces, and but nothing I kind of thought too hard about. You know, there was some guy in front of us in theater though. He was loving it. Like he was dying laughing at all the dumb little jokes and the action pieces, and like yes, like every time. And he was like an older man too.
Like, oh hell yeah, Hulk!
There was some of that going on in the theater too. But so you know, it was fun to watch in a theater full of people that were also enjoying the movie. But yeah, I liked it. You know, I probably won't ever watch it again unless it's on TV. But I haven't watched any of those movies. Any of the Marvel movies. I've watched Iron Man when it's been on TV a little bit, but for the most part, they're kind of just fun, you know, blockbuster movies to go check out in the theater.
Yeah, which is what I think is kind of funny to me is like I remember when I was younger and the Spider-Mans with Tobey Maguire came out, like I've watched those a lot and I still like watching them with the exception of the third one but with the newer, like I've watched Avengers, the first one a couple times, but outside of that, like Guardians of the Galaxy, while it was a really good movie, I have no interest in really rewatching it or any of the Iron Man movies or Thor's like Power Rangers, but for adults. I never really cared for it that much just because
I didn't ever watch the second Thor. But
yeah, like the first one where they're like walking through the desert town in daylight in their suits, like that makes you realize like why in the Batman movies and stuff they're always at night because it hides the goofiness of the suits. You know, I mean, you look more serious, I guess, because of the lighting at night than you do in the day, and it just lost you in that. But
I have watched Guardians of the Galaxies a couple times. I did like that a lot.
It's been my favorite of the Marvels, but
Well,
the recent ones.
I mean, I think the most attention-grabbing movie they've ever made under the Marvel banner was the what was it called? The Man Thing. That was the Sci-Fi Network original, Marvel's version of the Swamp Thing.
I remember that. I may actually own a copy of that.
Actually, I'm going to take that back. I really love the first two Blade movies. So
those aren't the current continuity, though.
No, they're not. But I just said, like, you know, I said that Guardians of the Galaxy is my favorite Marvel movie, but I'm going to retract that because Blade 1 and 2 were actually really awesome, and I find his character way more interesting than, like, some of the other characters they're bringing out of the woodwork for the newer movies.
Actually, to tie that into what I've been watching, actually today when I was goofing around writing the video I'm working on, I watched Blade 2, which is a pretty kick-ass movie. It was directed by Guillermo del Toro, and it was a very good action movie, but it was definitely at the era of over-reliance on bad CGI before they kind of really got it to a point that you should be using it. So the movie...
Yeah.
a lot of it holds up, but then a lot of it you're watching the fights and everybody just looks shiny and plastic and not quite right. I mean, stylistically, I love the movie, but
the worst scene is when they're like in his warehouse or whatever.
in front of the lights.
And, yeah, I mean, it's just like awful.
And it would have, like, the wire work that they had done through the rest of the movies would look so much better than all the bad CGI flipping and jumping around, but that was the early 2000s for you.
Wesley Snipes did a really good job of being Blade. And I'd kind of like to see him back in that role again. I don't know what he looks like physically now, if he still looks relatively the same or not. But he just did that role really well, and it'd be kind of awesome to bring it back somehow.
Well, I would just love to see him go in, like, the Avengers Infinity Gauntlet or whatever it's called, and just look at Tony Stark and be like, shut the fuck up, motherfucker.
Yeah.
Because
Nick Nolte was in those too, right?
no, Chris Christopherson.
Okay.
No, Chris
I always-
Christopherson. Yeah.
Oh, Blade! Oh, Nick Nolte! Oh.
I just remember his character looking like the drunk Nick Nolte that got arrested. Well, that picture's like really rough in the Hawaiian shirt.
Yeah, he was a country music. Chris Christopherson.
Yeah, then Nick Nolte was, however, in the Incredible Hulk, or the first Hulk movie with Eric Bana.
Yeah, okay, maybe that's what I was.
But there's been so many actors that have cycled through those movies. Like I said, I watched Blade 2. It's definitely worth the rewatch. You haven't watched it in a while. It's still pretty fun. Another movie I watched was one that I'd seen a bunch of trailers for last year, and I was actually pretty excited about it, which is The Houses October Built, which just hit Netflix Watch Instant this past week. And it's a found footage movie where a group of friends are doing a documentary where they're trying to find like the scariest haunted house they can. And they go around to different ones trying to find the scariest, and then eventually the scariest one finds them. And it's one of those movies where a lot of the early buzz was pretty good on it, and the trailers they cut look pretty good. But it's found footage, and a lot of the reviews I've read before, right before I saw it show up on Netflix, were like, it's not worth your time, don't watch it. But typically when I hear that, I still like to watch it just to, make my own opinion, and I definitely did not care much for it. It because it was kind of like because some of the people that were behind it, like the director and some of the actors, do a show on the Travel Channel, I think. So like there were parts of it that are kind of just like how you would see like people traveling to different haunted houses, and none of it's really scary because it's haunted houses, so it's all fake.
Yeah.
But then the ending of it, like when they actually deal with like this extreme haunted house group, I think it was like the Blue Skeleton. It just there's two ways they could have ended the movie. They could have had it end either, without spoiling it, when you think about it logically, it could have either ended with them actually finding a real group of like murderous people, or just finding like the most extreme like haunt that at the very end of the movie it's like, we're just messing with you, here you go. And between the two, those two choices existed, and I think the one they chose in the movie was the wrong one, because. But then again, it's one of those movies, like the found footage movies, they're always so hit or miss. Like this one, they didn't do anything to really establish the characters as being likable, so there was no real rooting interest against them or for them. But
they're just people like looking for the best haunted houses, right?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
And it was
they're
kind of
not like ghost. They're not like ghost hunters. It's like
no.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it's just people looking at actual haunted houses. And they just, like I said, the characters, none of them were that likable, and it's one of those movies where if you were thinking about seeing it, I wouldn't really recommend taking the time to watch it, even though it's out there on Netflix. I wasn't very impressed.
Well, one problem I have with
Have you watched Housebound yet?
Not yet.
Have you watched Housebound yet, William? Yeah, that's one you need to check out sometime. If you're looking for something on Netflix, it's pretty solid.
Well, I was also doing something else at the same time, so once about 10, 15 minutes into I was like, okay, this is not worth my full attention.
Well, one problem I have with the found footage movies is like they're all follow the same formula. You rarely get one where they kind of set themselves apart from anything. Like even if the criteria is like different, even if the found footage is like Paranormal Activity or this one's like set for haunted houses, they all just follow like the same formula and they all end the same way. And it's like I don't understand why not many people ever really try to just separate themselves from the others. It just all come out the same, even if the subject matter is different. They just all, for the most part, just kind of blend in together. If it's supernatural or non-supernatural, it just always, to me, seems like it ends up as the same thing.
Well, they do all kind of tend to end.
That was the only one that's really that different.
Set itself apart. You know, that was like an actual ambitious found footage film, where normally it almost just feels like they're doing that because it's like an easy way to make a movie. You know?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we don't have to worry about a lot of production elements if we just make it found footage. But you know, Cloverfield, that was not the case.
Well, and Cloverfield also had J.J. Abrams' involvement in a $30 million budget.
Yeah.
And I always forget about that movie. That one actually is different, but you just seem like, I guess a lot of them just do it though because it's cheaper to do, and it just always to me like Infernal that I watched. There's nothing in that movie that I just like felt like I watched like 500 different horror movies in one. It's like, well, this is the same thing I've watched on any of these other found footage movies, and it just kind of always like it seems like they always have like good ambitions, but then they just like, we're just going to follow Formula A to finish the movie out, and they don't ever really work on anything else, which just to me just kind of turns disappointing because it's like I want to see somebody do something that just really shocks me or is just different, and you're not getting.
Yeah, I mean, that's how a lot of them turn out. I think mostly just because they kind of follow the template that other things laid out. I mean, that's a lot of movies these days anyway, just kind of following what's already been done. But that was pretty much all I had a chance to watch this week, aside from the two main movies. So we can go ahead and get into discussing the first Mad Max movie, the 1979 film. A vengeful Australian policeman sets out to avenge his partner, his wife, and his son. This movie starred Mel Gibson in one of his earliest roles. And
he was like 21, I think, right?
Yeah, I think he was
very young.
Because he was born, I think, like in 56. So he would have been like early 20s when they were making this movie. And I guess we can just go to Derek for your impressions first.
A lot of people like Road Warrior better, but I really love this one because it's like the more grounded movie. Because it's actually set in like kind of like a post-apocalyptic world. They have some kind of energy crisis. And just, to me, just a more interesting film than the Road Warrior because it's just, you can actually see this really happening. Because there's nothing in it that's too outlandish. And this is one of those movies, too, where it's still very much like Mel Gibson's character, Max, is more grounded. He still gets hurt. You know, and the movie actually has some good car chases in it and actually has a really cool car in it. And I really love it. It's one of I always forget how much I like it until I rewatch it because it's a little maybe slower pace than Road Warrior, but I just think just overall I just enjoyed it better.
Yeah, I think the pace for me slows down the rewatchability, which I mean it's still not like a slow movie at all, but compared to the Road Warrior, which feels like mostly action, you know, or just interesting set pieces and everything. Mad Max, it's fine to show the relationship with his wife and stuff, but you're kind of like, okay, this is like the boring dad Max, but the second version you get like, the just like, he's just out for himself and he cares about nothing but, his own skin. And I think that just appeals to me more because he seems more like he does seem more like a mythological character, where in Mad Max it is more grounded in reality for sure.
One thing that I want to say too, it kind of almost reminds me of Death Wish. This is a movie we talked about with Charles Bronson in it a couple podcasts ago, because it's just kind of like the same formula, like gang members. I think they either unsuccessfully try to rape his wife, but they kill his wife and his kid, and then he just goes out for vengeance, and it's kind of similar to that. So it's just like, this is just a movie just like that set in a post-apocalyptic world with an Australian guy in a fast car and a bunch of motorcycles instead of Jeff Goldblum.
I think it's another example of a movie where there's a ton of movies that have motorcycle gangs, and I don't know that there was ever a motorcycle gang in existence that's ever been like the ones that show up in some of these movies. I mean, like, and because the Mad Max movies, we're not talking about Thunderdome just because that one I don't remember liking it as much, and who has time to watch 3 movies in a week. With the Mad Max, the main villain, Toe Cutter, he's a pretty iconic villain. You still like, before having rewatched this, I still remembered vaguely what he looked like. And this movie too it was a relatively low budget movie for the time. Because I think that, at least according to IMDb, Mad Max 2: The Road Warrior had a budget that was 10 times Mad Max. And two, something I think that's actually hilarious about this, I mean, not that I saw it in theaters because I wasn't born yet, but apparently when this movie first got brought to the U.S., since it was an Australian movie, I mean, they speak English, but the Australian accents and some of like their, some of the words they used, people found it confusing, so they did a U.S. redub of the movie. So they had Mad Max out with like a terrible redubbed audio track, and the movie wasn't really released in its proper form until a few years later, which is why the Road Warrior in the U.S. was just sold as the Road Warrior that we attached to Mad Max. But then by that point, Mad Max had built up a little bit of a following, especially once home video became prevalent. But the movie is definitely, like Mad Max, is definitely a fun watch, and there's only really a couple major action scenes in it. But it's definitely it's paced a little bit slower than Road Warrior, but it's also more of an exploitation style film that you saw more of in the 70s.
Yeah.
And this one's almost more of like a character piece too, because it just sets you up for the Road Warrior. It shows you how, you know, a lot of times people don't really get into that as much, but it shows you why he is the way that he is in the later films. You know, I mean, I think it's definitely, like I said, I almost kind of prefer it over the Road Warrior just because I just like movies that are a little more well-grounded. Because if something was going to happen like that, it'd probably be more like this and then less like Road Warrior. It's just not as fun to watch. But I still think it has a lot of good moments in it. Like, I enjoyed the car scenes in it and just the way his character, like, one of the best scenes at the end of the movie when he gets Toe Cutter and he flips the car over and he handcuffs him to the car and it's about, you know, I think the fuel's leaking out and there's a fire. And his alternative, he gives him the hacksaw and he says you can cut through your hand, which is going to take 10 minutes, or you can cut through your ankle, which is going to take, I think, 5. And the car he only has 5 minutes to do it. And as he's walking off, the car blows up. Like that, I really like that part because that's actually, it was a very satisfying end to that movie.
I think it was actually Johnny Boy.
Johnny Boy?
Yeah, Johnny.
Yeah. It was Toe Cutter. He just fucking like ran over and killed.
And his eyes popped out of his helmet a little bit before the impact, which a trick they do a couple times in this movie. I think they use like a prosthetic face, you know,
Yeah.
and then do like a quick shot of these eyes bulging out. They do it. It's in the beginning too. Can't remember who it happens to in the beginning, but then it happens to Toe Cutter too.
Yeah, so it's kind of ironic in both movies, in Mad Max and The Road Warrior, the main bad guy dies by getting or destroyed by like a semi or like a bigger truck by going head on.
George Miller obviously likes throwing people underneath semi trailers. I mean, just between this, you know, and Mad Max 2, just the trailer alone for Fury Road has a few shots of that. I think people just going underneath the semi, getting rolled over, which never gets old.
Yes.
Apparently, they try to pay some guy like $50 to run over Toe Cutter in the movie, you know, with the semi.
Yeah.
And it was his personal semi, and he was like, "No, it's going to jack up my front end." Once he found out, so they put a piece of sheet metal or something over the front of his truck and just painted on like headlights and everything. So it's actually just painted on. It's not even, you know, the actual front of a truck, but the shot's so quick, you know, you're looking at the bike, not the front of the vehicle.
And I think too, towards the beginning of the movie, when they're chasing the Knight Rider through on the road, one of the vans they destroy, I think that was actually George Miller's van. Like, he had to destroy his own van while making it, but like the
one that kind of spins around in the road.
Yeah, the one that they kind of just destroyed the rear end of.
Yes. Yeah.
So the, like you said, in this one there's only a couple of real set pieces, and I still don't understand the dynamics of how you easily run over a mother and child with the motorcycle and don't yourself wreck. But I mean, it just serviced the plot line. But it was definitely a good movie, just a little bit slower pace. And like we said, most people like even Mel Gibson said his favorite of the series was Road Warrior. So do you have any more thoughts on this one before we move to Road Warrior?
No, I mean, I think it's a great film, you know, and it's the stunts are awesome, even though there's, you know, it's not like full on action for the entire time, even though there's still a ton of action in it. Just the stunts are awesome, you know, the motorcycle stunts, cars, everything. Like the Australians know how to crash a car.
Yeah, like I was saying earlier, this is my personal favorite, and I just always lean toward, you know, I'm kind of compared to a couple of different movies that maybe aren't fair comparisons, but, you know, like your Die Hard and your Death Wish and stuff, the more grounded of the movie franchises, I always seem to like a little bit better. Because, like I said, all the stunts in the movie are awesome. I just really like this one just because maybe I'm just a little partial to stuff being more realistic, but I really enjoy this one the most out of the two that we're talking about today.
One thing that you notice throughout the movie, being somebody who's into cars, like all the cars in the movie sound great, at least in terms of their engines and everything. Because I heard that some people said, like, you know, America has its gun culture and other countries have certain things, but in Australia it's kind of a car culture, which definitely shows through in these movies because they're very focused on the cars, and they're very focused on just the kind of car porn before, you know, Michael Bay kind of came out and did his version of car porn, but they show a lot of the vehicles and the Interceptor that Max used at the end of the movie, which shows up again in part 2. That's just a pretty awesome looking car.
Yeah, it was like a 72 or 73 Falcon, which I believe that one was only produced in Australia.
Yeah.
Which kind of sucks, just me and you being car guys. Is like a lot of the cool cars over the years always end up being not here. You know, especially ones like that. But
yeah, so I guess
The other thing about this movie, didn't it make like almost $100 million or something? Like, I believe it was the largest cost to profit ratios from when it was made all the way up until the Blair Witch Project. Like, it was a huge hit. So George Miller paved the way for him to direct Babe, Pig in the Big City, Happy Feet.
which go hand in hand when you think about the subject matter.
how many people got ran over in semis in those movies?
In Happy Feet, the entire group, the entire parliament, no, it's owls. What are penguins? What's a group of penguins called? I have no idea. They all got killed by a semi.
That's the actual director's ending.
That was his last 3 movies: Babe, Pig in the Big City, Happy Feet, and Happy Feet 2. And then Mad Max Fury Road with a $100+ million budget film that's all action.
All right.
Which is it's just awesome that he's able to bring this back around and it wasn't handed off to somebody else that says, you know, I mean, you know, we haven't seen the movie yet because it's not released in theaters and we're not around until this Friday, but it just, I mean, it looks like it has tons of energy and, you know, at least heart to it.
And I've seen a number of people from like other bigger sites that actually have got to see the Fury Road already. And they always say, oh, I'm embargoed and I can't say anything. But the audience was really hyped when they left. Because they can't.
I've actually read one review for it and it was very, very, very positive.
Well, you know, I really want this movie to be good because, you know, so far this summer I've watched Avengers, the second one, where it was called Age of Ultron or whatever, and I watched Fast 7. And I was disappointed with both of them, so I really hope that this one can be like one of the first good summer blockbusters or spring blockbusters, whatever you want to call it. And I just hope it does good, too, because I'm kind of tired of seeing, like, the superhero movies dominate everything. So it'd be kind of nice to get this movie to come back around and be successful and maybe just kind of get movies like this popular again. Because it doesn't really seem like there's been, like, a real big hit outside of, I know it's like a known franchise, but it's been a 20-year gap in between the last one and this one. Yeah. So it'd be really nice just to see this one be successful and maybe get a movie.
Well, they've already planned 2 more.
Yeah. Okay. Good. I mean,
it's already a new franchise.
Yeah, I would just like to see something else dominate than superhero, because I'm kind of superheroed out at this point. So it'd be nice just to get somebody else in there, something different to kind of dominate what's.
And one thing you're guaranteed to not get with this franchise. So kind of transitioning over to the Road Warrior, I looked up the other day. So in the movie The Road Warrior, the character of Max has 16 lines, and that's it. And you have some narration at the beginning and at the ending, and you have conversation between the characters, but most of the movie is visual. And a lot of the trailers for the new Fury Road look that way. I thought I read they did a lot of the story for Fury Road through like animation panels and stuff. Yeah, and storyboards
I
without.
read that too. Like that, the actual like dialogue script is very thin, and it's a lot of just descriptions of scenes.
Which is kind of nice though, because that's almost kind of like Clint Eastwood-esque from like his days in the westerns, where he would do movies and only maybe have a handful of lines.
I mean, absolutely. And going back to Road Warrior 2, like that's exactly the type of movie that is. It's the kind of the man with no name that comes into town, like, like fistful of dollars and Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Yoimbo, and one more I'm blanking on, but it's just that kind of archetypical character, that kind of just rolls into town and plays hero, but on the other side, he's out for his. Yoimbo is the other one I was thinking of, Kurosawa's film.
But I kind of like those characters because, like, I would say given the current history of the Mad Max character, you know that he's mostly a good character, but, like, it's just kind of nice to have them where they don't have a bunch of one-liners or not, their actions are more the personality than the words. Because that's not something that's done as much anymore. One of the more recent movies that did that, which was one of my favorites of all time, is Ryan Gosling in Drive. Because his character, I don't even remember if he has any dialogue. If he does, it's very
he does.
few.
Yeah, he definitely has dialogue, but
it's very, very small amount, But his character was still likable, and I kind of like when movies do that because I think it's harder to make you like a character that speaks less than it is to make you like a character that speaks a lot,
And so just on the Mad Max 2, The Road Warrior, just the brief synopsis of it, since we've already kind of gotten into it. In the post-apocalyptic Australian wasteland, a cynical drifter agrees to help a small gasoline-rich community escape a band of bandits. So this is essentially kind of like the 2016 election cycle. It's a bunch of people trying to get their gas out of town before... it's just... I love in this movie, like, the character of Max, like, the opening... it shows, like, the opening narration. It has some different clips and scenes from the first film. And it just kind of shows you why in this version of the character Max doesn't really talk, doesn't really care about anybody. He's very just, surviving. He's a survivalist. And he's so sentimental that he calls his companion Dog. The dog's name is just literally Dog.
Yes. Yeah, he has no... Yeah.
And that dog is actually a good actor.
Yeah, didn't you say the dog was actually a shelter pickup or something?
Yeah, they found it at a local shelter, and it was like a couple of days or maybe just one day away from being put down. And I think they said like it seemed to respond well to commands, and they trained it. And then when they started filming the movie, they realized it was very afraid of car engines, and they had to make earplugs for it to put on set when they were filming.
Wow. Did not know that.
One character, too, that always just sticks in my mind in this movie is the gyrocopter guy. I can't think of his name. But he reminds me of the actor that portrays Dwight in the British version of The Office, and I think he also was in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies as one of the like comic relief pirates. But they always remind me of each other so much. But what was that actor's name? You know, William?
The guy from Pirates of the Caribbean?
Yeah. I can't think of his name.
And in this movie, the character's name was the Gyro Captain. They didn't actually have a name.
I didn't. But I just remember, like, they just remind me of each other so much. I guess there's both, like, tall, skinny, lanky guys. But
with bug eyes.
Yeah, bug eyes. But he was a good character. He was an interesting character in the movie. And I think Mad Max, I think he gets cockblocked once or twice by him. Because then he trying to talk to one of the younger girls in the oil colony or whatever.
Yeah, almost convinced her to go away with them.
With the top ponytail or whatever she has.
Yeah. Like the definitely like 80s like girl band or like girl musician hair.
Okay, so to just go back a second, so the actor you're talking about from the Pirates of the Caribbean and all that stuff, that his name is Mackenzie Crook.
Yeah, they remind me of each other so much. I guess just their build and the way they act.
That's kind of racist. Just because they're both lanky white dudes with bug eyes who are really thin.
And And not, they have accents. One's Australian, one's British, I guess.
What? And then looking up something else too. I couldn't remember what character it was, but somebody from Fury Road, the same actor, was in the original Mad Max, and it was Toe Cutter.
Oh,
He's in
nice.
the new Fury Road.
As Toe Cutter?
Then you have Humongous, who is just the main bad guy, and it's a. I would wonder how much of the hockey mask idea was. Well, actually, this came out before Friday the 13th, and they would have had the hockey mask.
Yeah,
I
because
believe.
this was 1981, right?
Yeah, so that was before part 3 where they introduced the mask for Jason. So this is actually prior to that.
So maybe it's the other way around there.
Also,
Yeah.
Humongous also reminded me, was WWF popular at that point in time? Because he kind of reminded me of like something you would see from a wrestler. Just the build, the type of character they picked, and the way he would talk on the microphone and just acted, just had that like theatrical wrestler vibe is what I got from him.
Beyond Thunderdome definitely has more of a wrestling influence. So,
But one thing I really liked about Humongous is like they never really said why he was the way that he was. They never really explained the mask or what. Did they ever show what he looked like underneath the mask? I cannot remember. I don't think they did.
No.
Which I think is a good thing, because sometimes it's like makes his character that much more interesting, and the fact that all those guys in that gang were like kind of scantily clad.
Well, it was all very S&M inspired. I believe they said like the costume designer for the movie lived close to an S&M shop, and like over the course of like preparing for the movie, bought a bunch of stuff from there and used that as the influence. And the character Wes has the assless chaps.
Yeah,
yeah.
That's the Mohawk guy, right?
Yeah, the second main villain other than Humongous.
If anybody's ever watched, oh crap, what's the Robin Williams movie with where he's Peter Pan?
Hook.
Hook. If you ever seen Hook, the kid with the Mohawk grew up to become that guy. I'm pretty sure, because it's like the same, just him growing up. So that's his future. He leaves Neverland and starts killing people for
and going back to talking about never really showing his face and kind of the background. Like I think George Miller with this movie, he learned to trim the fat. I mean, not necessarily it's fat, but he understood what it took to make a good movie, and the stuff you didn't necessarily need. Not that it would have been a bad thing, but he kind of just trims away everything that you don't need, and then just pretty much a ton of action, and then it's all storytelling through a lot of visuals too. Because Max is so silent.
Yeah, I just love like the Max character in this movie because he's very much like a Clint Eastwood character. He's like just for a couple of dollars more, almost just like a mercenary for hire who really doesn't care about what happens to everybody that's there. I think over time he cares more than he did when he first came in. But it just made his character just a little cooler because it's just like he was in it for him and that was it. Because I think when he did get the oil transport there, he just going to take his stuff and leave. Then he ends up staying when the shit kind of hits the fan.
Well, after he actually takes the gas and attempts to leave, and then his car gets blown up and they kill his dog.
Yeah.
And then the gyro captain gets him. And just one thing about this movie is whenever they have the car chase sequences or the different car scenes, it's very chaotic. It's not like a lot of movies where they have these big set pieces that play out in a linear fashion. Like stuff's just happening because it happens, which is more true to how it would happen in real life. It doesn't really play like the hero card as much, where you have, of course Max survives, but you have a lot of like current movies like the Avengers and stuff like that. You have, or the Fast and the Furious movies, you have like the name characters who can have anything in the world happen to them in their car and they're okay. They can do all kinds of shit. And this one, like if your car flips off the side of the road and it blows up, you're dead. Like it didn't play favorites with like name characters you've seen. Aside from the gyro captains, a few times in watching it, you would think he died. But
when he crashes, like you would think at least the gyrocopter will be wrecked whenever it crashes into the ground. Then he just like rolls up on it.
Yeah,
that's the only thing. Like, okay, what? But they probably didn't have the time to reshoot that a bunch of times to where he lands safely.
Well, one thing too is that they carried over the injury that Max sustained toward the end of the original, where his leg got messed up and he had to wear a leg brace because of it.
Yeah.
Well, and two, the jacket's missing part of the sleeve because that was the one he got ran over with in the prior movie.
Yeah, but it's not the same dog though, right? Because what happened to his dog in the other one? Remember, he had a dog.
Well, the dog in the first one was a different dog, and it got killed and hung in the woods, and they took his wife.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I forgot about that.
So they just all about running people over with semis and killing dogs.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what tugs at the heartstrings and gets people excited. See people run over by semis.
Because it was just kind of funny because we some of this earlier is like like the dog dying is probably one of the sadder moments in the movie. In the movies because it's like you always like the dog because they don't ever do anything to make you dislike them.
Yeah. Except for Cujo.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Old Yeller didn't do nothing wrong.
but it's just like in these movies, and this is also when Mel Gibson was kind of, people forget now because he had all the racist rants and all the stuff he's done, but he was a pretty kick-ass actor in the 80s and early 90s. He's in a lot of great stuff when you go back and look through all the things he was in. And
Lethal Weapon?
Yeah. Now he's too old for that shit. And too racist. but like in this movie, just like he has a very good mixture of playing kind of a badass character, but without like hamming it up and kind of coming off over the top.
Oh yeah, and I think Tom Hardy's a perfect, actor for that. Just because he can be understated, but at the same time, kind of a badass.
And
it's just great transition.
And one thing I was happy about too was he wasn't doing like the gruff Batman like, show me the gasoline.
Yes,
he wasn't doing that shit. I mean, that was also before those movies started, but. It's just, very understated, didn't talk in a weird voice. It was just, there was an era to him. Like, when you rewatch the movie, too, like, even though he's, like, a badass, he really doesn't engage anyone physically, really. It's mostly just driving. And he shoots somebody.
Well, this one, you just get the experienced Max in this world, Like, the first one, he's not that he ever wasn't experienced in the police force, but now he's even more experienced than that because he's went through all the stuff he's went through.
Yeah, and two, you can tell civilization has just crumbled even further. Like,
the first one, there was a somewhat normal civilization, whereas this one is just completely just every person for themselves.
It is like the Wild West.
Yeah, it really is. Like, it just there's nothing there, and except it's funny to me that like in this world that there are where everything's just gone to shit. They have these really not extravagant, but just like weird white suits that they wear. They look kind of futuristic. So like all these other things are going on. They have like those like Max is just kind of in rags at that point because like you said his suit's messed up from where he got ran over, and all these other people just have like I can't think of the right word, but just very. What they wore was very.
They look like Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
That's what it reminds me of.
It was 80s futurism type clothing, but it does make sense when you think about it. If you're in a desert to wear white clothing that's reflective. But then, like, in the group when he gets there, there's the guy that kind of looks like Mick Jagger that's running the guy that's running the oil refinery.
The one thing too that was kind of cool in the movie is I guess the guy's legs didn't work very well, like the mechanic that had like the kind of
pulley system.
Yeah, the sling system. Yeah, that was always like that character for some reason too, because it's kind of different.
And then,
I mean, there's great little bits of comic relief in there too. Just like the mechanic or whatever. It's just like the right mix of a little bit of comedy. Doesn't take itself too seriously, but at the same time, it's pretty brutal. And doesn't really rely on the first film either. It's its own movie, and you can just watch it, enjoy it for what it is. They give you the recap in the first few moments, and really, it's like the recap. It's great to know, but it's almost like that's the most boring part of the movie. You're just waiting, and then after that, it's just like a rocket ship and just chase scene, crash, chase scene. Awesome dialogue exchanges between people, and
Yeah, this one's a whole lot better paced than Mad Max, because like it's almost just like once it gets going, it doesn't really stop.
Yeah.
I do like that about it. I mean, I still have to stick with the original, but this one's just if you're just looking for kind of like a different act, because there's not really many movies that effectively do what this movie did. With the way that the setting was, and it's like Mad Max and Fury Road although they have the same character. It's just completely different movies. Like they're not.
I mean Mad Max and Road Warrior.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're completely different movies. It is. They don't even feel really like a sequel as much because it's just such a vastly different world from the first to the second movie.
Well, it feels more just like you're taking a character you established and then putting him into a new universe.
Yeah, really, because it's just so different, you know.
And then, like, supposedly, like that, they didn't plan to make any further sequels beyond Road Warrior. And I think they had like a script later on that they they had an idea they liked, and they thought, oh, we can plug Mad Max into this for Beyond Thunderdome. And just this movie was perfectly paced, and you know, you have the end reveal where the narrator was the feral kid that Max gave the little music box to.
That was a nice little touch too. You know, it's like I said, everything it wraps up nicely. It does. It's like everything's there for a reason. There's no fat in this movie, you know?
Well, you know, something else too that you could almost kind of compare like the first two. And I'm not saying they're on the same level, but it's kind of like your Indiana Jones or James Bond movies where they acknowledge it's like this one just kind of is just same character, different setting.
Yeah, it's just archetypal. I mean, it's almost just like a hero thing where it's just this timeless, you know, kind of character hero. Like I was talking about Yoimbo and Sanjuro. That's the same thing as, which was before the Clint Eastwood Man with No Name, you know, Dollars trilogy, where somebody just comes into town. It doesn't matter who they are, what they've done. There's just like a great little story behind it, and then they kind of leave town, and that's the end of that story. Then you know there can be other ones. You know, it's they picked a great format for the character, the universe, and everything. And it's something I watched too. It's like it's almost just like a Western, but Westerns were kind of out of vogue at that point. So this is essentially taking that format and just putting car chases in it.
And something that I saw a little bit of a parallel in this movie and Escape from New York. In both movies, you kind of have the anti-hero that doesn't really care about anyone else besides themselves. And in both movies, the main characters witness a sexual assault of a male on a female and don't really do anything about it. And it's just, I think that was just like, there was an era when you could have a hero in the movie that wasn't necessarily would be a great hero in real life. Like they'll get the job done and save people if they have to, but they're not going out of their way to do it for anybody.
Yeah, you got those damn Avengers saving everybody that's falling in an elevator or whatever.
Speaking of that, I might be wrong on this, but I feel like in just a couple $dollars more with Eastwood, he rapes a girl.
For a few dollars more?
Yeah, and for a few $dollars more, he rapes a girl to teach her a lesson. And like
Eastwood?
Yeah, he rapes her. Like it's like the girl that's kind of like snitching out to the bad gang or something in town, and he essentially takes her into the bar and like rapes her, you know, and just like teaches her a lesson. And I thought that was kind of funny because that's just like for that character in that movie, it's like, oh, okay. But now I don't feel like there'd be any movie where you had a main character like that do something like that. Like I said, just like a character in this movie, watch a rape happen, like, meh. All right, let's go do something.
Like we'll see how they handle the character in Fury Road. How much the characterization of Max has changed.
Yeah. Well, from what I've read too, he actually George Miller worked with. I don't remember her name, but she wrote the Vagina Monologues. He worked with who's like a well-known feminist. He worked with her to develop the script, so it wouldn't be sexist, whatever. And I hear it's awesome because of it. And like Charlize Theron, like her character is like the biggest badass. And
well, let's just hope to God that she doesn't have a scene where she has to run left or to the right with something falling on top of her, because we know she ain't gonna live.
Yes, and you're calling back to Prometheus.
Yeah.
Well,
I gotta run left. I was run straight and die.
Well, I mean, I don't have to go into that movie, but it's just like I said, it'll be interesting to see how, because the political climate the movies are made in has changed since the 80s. Different. So like we said, you know, there's very few movies like, you know, you mentioned Drive as a movie where there's a mostly like morally ambiguous main character, but I think that you kind of have like a box office cap for how much you can make with the movie like that in this day and age. To be like the really big hit, you have to have the entire world at stake. You have to have characters that do, you know, typically that start out reluctant, have something happen, and then are fully in and become like the hero you deserve or whatever.
Yeah. Either that's the climate to get a big you know, a big blockbuster to be financially successful, or it's what studios think it is because it's, you know what I mean? It's because it's kind of degraded down to them taking less risk and kind of playing it safe, you know. So
well, it's one of those things too. When I first saw things for Fury Road, I wasn't that interested in it. But now that I've watched these two movies, and it just something that I have high hopes for it, and I just hope it can I just want to see something different succeed. You know, I really want it to be good, and just get something different started. Get some type of different franchise out there that's, you know, maybe a character that's not just more of an anti-hero character that maybe shouldn't be likable but is.
One,
You know,
two. I
The only
think
thing that worries me is the budget's so big.
Yeah.
I mean, thankfully, international markets are huge now, China and everything. But that's the only thing that worries me. Like, it can make a lot of money and still, you know, not be profitable in the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I
I
think
just want to see it succeed because, like I said, I just want to get something out there just to kind of break up all the minutia that's going on now.
Well, I think one thing there's a severe lack of in this day and age is adult movies that you can go and watch that aren't for children. Because as much as I like some of the superhero stuff or some of the action movies that come out, they're essentially kids' movies. They are built on characters that are geared towards kids, and they have tons of action figures. Like, it's yet to be seen how this movie turns out, but I would like to definitely see more movies that appeal to adults and not kids. Because because you go to these movies, is this one rated R, the Fury Road?
That-
I
that's
think
what
it
it's-
absolutely is. Yeah.
Yeah, so
good.
Positive.
because I've gone to plenty of movies that really aren't kid friendly, like the X-Men Days of Future Past. Like, there's a couple of fucks in it, like Wolverine kills a bunch of people. Like, when you think about it, like, it's not really a great movie for kids, but you go to the theater and it's full of kids. Like, I want to go to a big budget fun movie that's geared towards adults, and you just don't really see that very often.
No, another thing too though is it's like it's funny because you think about the movies that we watched when we were younger, especially because you're 5 years older than me, so I typically watch what you watched, and I probably both of us, I'm sure you did the same, Sean. We probably watched movies when we were 10 years and younger that probably we shouldn't have watched. But you know, I think that you know Mad Max too would definitely follow suit in that. You know, but you think of like movies like Predator and RoboCop and all those movies from the 80s that were pretty ultra violent, but we watched them, and now like I said, everything's so, and those are still marketed toward kids because I remember having Predator action figures and RoboCop action figures and all that stuff, you know. But if you go back and watch them, they weren't really for children whatsoever. So I think it'd be interesting to see how this gets marketed. I'm sure there won't be any action figures. I don't know, there might be action figures.
I think there'll definitely be the collectible ones, but I think too, like RoboCop and Predator were more after the fact. Kids liked it, so they made action figures, and because they had a RoboCop TV show, and Predator like had the comics and stuff.
Yeah, I had some Terminator action figures.
Yeah,
too.
even Terminator. Yeah, but think about this too, though. You even covered this in one of the reviews you did in Batman 2. That wasn't. You go watch it now, and that was not a movie for kids, and it's probably marketed very heavily toward them. But there's no way nowadays that they'd have a Batman movie similar to that.
I think Batman Returns kind of one of the reasons that Tim Burton didn't get asked to come back for the third movie was McDonald's when they were looking over like production images when they're putting together the Happy Meal toys. They're like, how the fuck do we sell a toy to the kids of Danny DeVito with black blood coming out of his mouth, and he's in a disgusting white unitard, and he's like a little penguin person. So then they had like the toys that dressed him up more like the traditional penguin.
More like the animated series Penguin that they ended up having, because we had like because it still followed a similar shape. It was just maybe more nicely dressed.
But back to Road Warrior. Just a really good movie, and it just ends with, you know, Max by the end of the movie is really kind of the same person he started out as. He just, you know, once because he took his gas as the reward and left, and then his car got blown up and they killed his dog.
Well, he's the same, except for he had that slight change of heart where he decides to help him out after, you know, he gets beat up and taken back because they helped him. So he's like, okay, I'll help out.
Well, I think he knows, like, either he helps them or he dies.
Yeah.
And he knows that he has a better shot of actually completing the mission than any of them. And then once they're done, he goes on his own way.
And the tankers chase scene at the end is just like phenomenal. There's so many good little set pieces like within that chase, you know. People falling off, going underneath the wheels, just everything.
Yeah, these movies end up being a very satisfying experience. Like the first two, because I don't really remember Thunderdome that much, and I know we're not talking about it anyway, but they just seem to be like you're at the end of the movie, you're not really like, I didn't really like this. I just feel like at the end of the movie, you're pretty happy with the way everything, like maybe one or two different things you want different, but overall, everybody kind of gets what they deserve by the end of the movie. So it ends up being a little bit more rewarding than maybe you thought going into it.
For me, the rewarding part is just the awesome action.
Yeah.
like that done well. Like Fury Road, I have not been this excited for a film in I don't know how long.
It kind of worries me a little bit though that I just want it to be good.
I have faith in George Miller because he's great at a visual storyteller. And it just the action looks like it's well done. It's not overly an overuse of CGI or it's just. It looks like at the very least you will see some like awesome set pieces that you haven't seen recently.
And it's very easy to overlook now, like how much stuff that Mad Max and the Road Warrior would influence that came out after that.
Oh yeah,
and
even to this day, there's still like Fallout.
Yeah,
the new Fallout was heavily based on that. Especially, I feel like just the dog. Isn't there a dog in there that you get that can die that dies or something? Or am I thinking of Fable?
I'm not sure.
Fable.
But I know, like the Will Smith movie, I Am Legend, he had the dog. Not that was necessarily influenced by Mad Max, but I think it just became more of a trope in Mad Max, like the roaming wanderer in a post-apocalyptic world where their companion is a dog. And it was very influential to a lot of things that came after it. So I guess we can kind of go around and give our final opinions on the movie. We can start with Sean.
Yeah, like I've already said, I love this movie. It's my favorite one. Yeah, Beyond Thunderdome. It's goofy. It has its. Apparently, a little side fact. I think what happened was George Miller's producer friend. I don't know if it's Byron or what. He died in a helicopter accident during the production or pre-production one.
Yeah.
So George Miller pretty much only did I think the action scenes, and somebody else handled directing all the other stuff. So. I'll credit that misstep to that, but this is by far my favorite Mad Max movie just because it's just so well done, and like I said, there's no fat to it. It's just infinitely rewatchable for me. And I'm hoping, the new set pieces look amazing in Fury Road, so it just seems like the same deal. It almost seems like a redo of this where they're cutting the fat, where Beyond Thunderdome had a lot of different little set pieces, the little kid village, whatever. The first Mad Max, it's kind of a bigger origin story, and there was a lot more characters with side stories and all this stuff. But it seems like Fury Road is also getting back to this, and this is like the purest form of presenting an action film where you kind of get down to the meat of it and just kind of show it off.
Yeah, I know originally it's almost like I talked myself out of liking Mad Max the most because when you start talking about this movie and you just think about it, it really is it's a great action movie because like I said, there's very little fat, there's not a bunch of unnecessary dialogue, there's not very many unnecessary scenes. The first movie set everything up, so it didn't only had to cover what it needed to cover just to catch anybody up, and then it just gets straight to it, and the action scenes are really good. A lot of the characters that the villains, that's something we really didn't talk about is how good the actual villains are.
Yeah.
How much you actually hate them. And, and they're so weird. Like I can't think of the guy's name with the mohawk, but he has
Wes.
Yeah, Wes has his little lover boy or something that gets hit in the head with a boomerang. And it just infuriates him.
Yeah.
And it's just there's so much weirdness in this movie, but it worked out great. And I just love, and it's maybe just too you got people in assless chaps. You got a guy with a hockey mask and 2 strings of hair and super muscly. And it's just a really weird movie. And another thing, too, is, talking about the action scenes, there's not really many actual fight scenes. It's mostly all just car-based or vehicle-based, which I think is interesting, too, because, I know the technology is different than it is now, too. But, movies like Fast 7, you go watch it, and you're just like, oh, my God, I can't believe, what are they, it's just, where this movie... It's not that it's not completely unbelievable that those actions would happen while you're doing what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just made it that much more interesting. So I really hope that the newest one can follow suit on that because I think it's kind of needed to. It's just kind of nice to see gritty stuff because it was kind of a gritty movie again, like the first one. Maybe shot a little bit more action-esque. I don't know what the right word for that is, but just a little bit more action in it. But it's a great movie, and if somebody hasn't seen it, I mean, they need to because there's really no negative part about it.
And it's a movie that just holds up really well over time. Like if you watch it, there's only a few instances where they like sped up the film to achieve the look of stuff going fast, but that's still not as egregious. Like when I was talking earlier about Blade 2, like the early 2000 CG. I'll take a sped up scene with cars that are appearing to move faster over bad CGI any day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because that's more tolerable. Ghostbusters did that a lot too. Just don't.
Yeah, but I definitely think that this is a movie that when you rewatch it, you know, because I've seen this a bunch of times. Because like I don't know if Derek mentioned, like our dad watched the Mad Max movies a ton of times when we were younger, so we saw this a bunch. But like, there's so many things that have come out since then that borrowed a lot of stylistic elements that you don't really realize until you rewatch the movie. You're like, oh yeah, all these things were stolen in these other movies. But like this movie had very interesting villains, you know, with Humongous and Wez, and then in the first one, Toe Cutter and his whole gang. And in this one, I just like they give you the odd villains without the backstory, or because in a lot of movies like this today, they would spend half the movie giving you the backstory on Humongous, how he got his mask, what happened to him. And this one, they're just like, these guys are fucked up. You got to deal with it.
This is the world we're in now. Here's what happens in this month or time period. You know,
Humongous is kind of like a Bane type character if you think about it. The mask and the weird voice.
Yeah, and just being evil.
He like has he appears to have some type of moral code too. You know, he's
a weird.
He's not. Yeah, he gives those people a chance to get out, and they have a hard choice to make too, because either way, you know, damned if you don't, and they end up just going for it. And it's just, you know, a bad situation. Max happens to roll into town because he's not necessarily trying to save somebody, but he's trying to get fuel. He's trying to get something out of it. And then it's interesting how he gets roped into all this and just kind of falls into this trouble. And just,
well, I think too,
less ugly McJagger die.
Yeah. Yeah, the only main characters aside from Max that live from beginning to end are the gyro captain and the little feral kid.
Which is not an annoying character, because in the 80s you had a lot of annoying children characters like Short Round and Temple of Doom, and the little feral kid didn't come off that annoying, because he was the one that actually killed, what's his name, Fez's...
Rez's lover boy.
Yeah, Rez's lover boy. He's the one that killed him, right?
Yeah, with the badass banger, I can't talk, boomerang. The bangarang. He threw a bangarang out from the outback. But yeah, so the little kid, I mean, granted, that was part of the reason that the Humongous's gang wanted to kill everyone all the more.
Which is just funny, because like before that scene even happened, they'd already killed a couple of those people, right?
Well, they had captured them. I don't think they killed them yet at that point. Well, they killed a few of them. That's
they
right.
killed a few of them in the act of capturing.
Well, that was the one that they raped, and then the one that Max took back to the base, and the other they had captured, and then later would kill. But then, like in the scene with the tanker truck, when Max is like throws on the brakes to throw Wez off the top of the truck because he's trying to get into the cabin. The car that's falling behind them has two of the people from the oil compound like on the platforms on the front of the car, and they just smash into the back, and like their heads go just like blown up.
That semi chase scene is just so many good moments like that. Like one of those moments would have been awesome, you know. But there's the dude that catches on fire, and he's like, I'm okay, and his hands are on fire. And then him and the woman roll underneath the car. You know, it's like, oh, both of them are dead now. Like, it's just nothing, you know.
And it doesn't feel overly long. It feels like it built up to it and made sense, and it happens. It's not like Pirates of the Caribbean, like all those movies had like 25-minute fight scenes where it's like, man, they could have really cut this down to like 5.
Yeah.
But in this movie, in Road Warrior, you earn every second of, like, they earn it. And then in Mad Max, a lot of the scenes really only lasted 4 or 5 minutes, like they had the actual action in it, and those were all earned.
Yeah, the climax of Mad Max too. Like, I was kind of paying attention to the runtime this time, and he doesn't lose his wife to the very end, and it's only like, you know, he's only out for revenge for, you know, 10 minutes of the movie, 15 minutes, you know?
Yeah.
It's not like it's a revenge film, but it's not like a typical revenge film where 20 minutes in they lose somebody and then they go on a rampage throughout.
Yeah.
It's I don't want to say oddly structured, but you know, it's kind of not a traditionally structured revenge film. That first movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the first one's also much more of an exploitation film because I believe that the Road Warriors budget was 10 times the first movie.
Yeah.
Which definitely shows just because of the amount of vehicles they had on screen and there was actually a lot of collateral damage and things going on.
A lot of flamethrowers.
And what's great, again, they cut the fat. Like the first movie, there's so many different, you know, they have a hospital location, they got all these other locations, and, you know, there's still somewhat of a society and everything. So there's different characters, there's police station, all this stuff. In the second one, it's just you know, the kind of the home base for the people with the oil tanker and just wide open spaces so they can just spend all their money on crashing cars, you know?
Yeah.
And just take them out and just rip them through there and just do whatever they want and not be bothered, not have to worry about locations or whatever.
Yeah, so
Maximize carnage.
So this movie, it's a very tight movie that has really great action. It's got very memorable villains that you can still, you know, when you think back to this movie, you think of Max. If you're thinking about the Road Warrior, you think of Humongous and his, you know, hockey mask and get up. And then Wes with his mohawk and
the gyrocopter captain, which I mean, that vehicle alone was cool, you know.
Well, I feel like too though he was kind of like a smaller role in the movie, but he just came out really memorable. With also the actor did a good job too. I mean, like he did a good job portraying the character because his character is kind of a skis bag. You know,
is that a real word? Skis bag?
I don't know, but that's what it was. He was a bag of skis. Like he tried to like make the girl run off with him, and like his teeth were really bad, and Max and the dog were eating, and he tried to take the food from the dog, and the dog was gonna bite him. You know, like he's kind of a scuzzy dude. You know.
So one of your criteria for being a skis bag is have bad teeth.
Yeah, you have bad teeth. You drive a gyrocopter.
I mean, hey,
not take dog food.
When you're in the apocalypse, not everyone has time to brush their teeth.
Yeah,
he's just in between eating all that dog food.
Yeah.
When his number one weapon was snakes.
Yeah, I forgot about that. He set the snake up for him. And one thing too I thought was interesting is like ammunition at that point was kind of scarce. Mm-hmm. And one of the rewards Max got when he helped him was a lady gave him a shotgun shell.
Yeah.
And then it ended up not working, but he still got it because I think he fired it and just nothing happened.
No, that was the first time when he brought the truck back. When he actually brought it back, they gave him some shells that worked.
Oh, okay, they did. Okay. I remember one scene in the movie, he goes to shoot and just...
That's the shells that come out on the tanker, right? On the front of it.
Yeah, and then...
he, like, has the little boy trying to get it. Like,
yeah. Yep. So I think it's fair to say that everybody liked both movies, loved The Road Warrior. We're definitely looking forward to Fury Road, and we'll be talking about that in the next podcast. So... if you want to find more of what we're doing, you can always go to housebythevideostore.com. You can find us on our social media accounts on facebook.com/HBTVS or on Twitter at HBTVS_official. And we now have a Periscope account set up, so we might start using that to broadcast some things, just quick things if we review a movie or something, we can get out some quick video, see if anybody actually responds to that. We also have the Instagram, which is also HBTVS_official. You can always subscribe to our YouTube channel at House by the Video Store. And if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at Will_droid.
And this is Sean. Mine's at Blevins_Sean, BLEVINS_SEAN.
I'm a heavier Instagram user, so mine's at MetaWorldDerek. Also, too, I think I'm going to start focusing on like messing around with like more classic games. So if anybody had any suggestions of stuff for me to mess with, the stuff, you know, GameCube, PlayStation 2, and back, nothing near that I'm interested in messing with. But that'd be kind of my main focus on that stuff the next couple of weeks.
All right, so that wraps up this episode. So the next one, we'll be talking about Mad Max Fury Road, and hopefully we'll enjoy that one. Hopefully it turns out as well as we hope it does. But thanks for listening. We'll have a new episode next week.